public and present our findings to the trustees once the hearing is closed. And that will be, again, after the anticipated date on the 29th. So what I'd like to do is have Poquott present the Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ted. My name is Chick Voorhees of Nelson, Pope & Voorhees, and I'm an environmental planning consultant with about 40 years of experience throughout Long Island. I'm also a licensed merchant marine officer, Coast Guard licensing and a lot of experience boating on Port Jefferson Harbor. And I'm joined by my son, Chris Voorhees, who is a licensed professional engineer with Nelson and Pope Engineers. And we've been working hand in hand with respect to permitting as well as design and preparation of plans that would facilitate the construction of the proposed community pier. My involvement started in 2016 when we prepared a feasibility study for the trustees. And based on that, launched into some permitting and preparation of plans that I'll be presenting to you this evening. And tonight is obviously the planning board meeting for the review of those plans in accordance with the village law. The site is at the end of Washington Street, as we know. It's the existing California Beach Park. First thing we did was obtain soundings. In other words, the depth of water at low tide in order to determine the depth to achieve for the purpose of navigation, but also for design because it's critically important both in the village law and under DEC requirements to ensure that the float itself will not rest on the bottom. And I'll describe each of the components of the dock facility. Once soundings were obtained, we positioned a structure in the optimal location to take advantage of depth that is achieved as quickly as possible as you move out from the shoreline. And that location ended up being right here. The various components are, you have the upland parking lot area, there'll be some restriping of stalls in proximity to the access to the pier. There will be an ADA access ramp of concrete with a landing before traversing to the fixed dock itself. There will be a fixed dock that's about 128 feet long, and at the end of that will be almost a turnaround or a landing area where it's just a little wider at the end. I think it goes out to about 6 feet in width. The rest of the pier is a standard width of 4 feet, which is consistent with this type of pier design. It's consistent with the village code, and it is also consistent with the requirements of New York State DEC. One of the features will be to allow shoreline traversing. In other words, if you're walking on the shoreline, you can go up a series of steps on the south side and down a series of steps on the north side to have a continuous walkway across the beach at high tide, and then of course you can pass under it at low tide if you so choose. At the end of the fixed portion will be a 30-foot gangway that makes the transition from the fixed dock to a float, and that basically enables access to boats. If you had an elevated fixed pier, it would be very difficult to get in smaller recreational boats. So the gangway goes to a float that is 30 feet long, 8 feet wide, held in place by pilings, and as I said, is accessed by the gangway. Now that float goes up and down with the tide. We have about a 6 to 7 foot tidal range, and so we have to account for that with the ramp. That's one of the reasons why it's 30 feet long, so as it goes up and down, you have a reasonable slope at low tide to get to the float. The float will be in a minimum of 2.5 feet of water at low tide. That's the back end of the float. And that again is, as I said, so it does not rest on the harbor bottom and destroy benthic life.
No, there he is.
It'll be approximately 3.5 feet at the deeper end at low tide. So this is clearly for use by smaller vessels at low tide, certainly, and whatever use that individuals and boaters may use it for, primarily to access their boats. And again, this went through a good deal of thought and consideration by the village board of trustees, and we're really just considering design. But if there are specific questions on use, we can help answer them. The dock will have water service, I believe also electric.
It's just gonna have water service.
We'll have water service, and it will have solar powered rail lighting for nighttime, as well as 2 white solar navigation lights on the pilings at the end of it. And so that really summarizes the overall design features. We do have very detailed design and construction plans, all of the pilings and stringers and decking that comprise the installation. Railings have been designed with aesthetics in mind to minimize the mass and appearance, but also to provide safety. And all of those plans are part of the package that is pending before the village, as well as details and cut sheets for the lighting. These are the solar lights at for navigational purposes. These are the rail lights. It's a product that we have found to be very effective, especially given its solar power. And that really concludes the specific components of the installation. There has been consideration of construction and access and how you would get equipment and stage all of those materials for the installation, and that those areas are shown on the diagrams. So Ted,
All right, well, great.
gives us an overview of the plans and a little bit more detail, but we can get into as much detail as needed depending on the questions.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you, Chairman. The plans are available at the village hall. Yes. What I'd like to do is start with comments on this end of the room and work our way across. We have a stenographer that's recording the meeting. So I'll need you to state your name and address. And you need them to come up?
If they could, just.
If you can't hear them?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so are there any, do we have comments from this side of the room? All right.
Oh, go ahead.
Cindy Davis, Birchwood Avenue, and I just had a question. So if you're walking along, you do have to go up and down steps to get past the dock?
You could either pass under it at lower tidal
Right, low
stages,
tide, but if it's not,
or if it's high tide, you can go up and down steps on each side.
and there'll be railing? Okay, I'm just concerned about people who have difficulty maneuvering, putting steps in their way.
Felicia Chilak, Washington Street. I saw in the new law that this was supposed to be posted at California Park 28 days prior to this public hearing, and it wasn't. Correct, Roger?
I'm not sure about the times, but there was supposed to be signs
At the waterways.
at the water side and at the land side, at the side of the dock.
I did post a sign.
No, I've been there every day, 3 times a day. Not one sign has been there, Joe, sorry.
It's up to me, so I said I put it down,
Well,
and you said
I have video every day.
Leave it, okay.
I just have, I want it noted, I have video every day,
Okay.
and it's,
You're
nothing's
correct.
been posted. Well, but there, it's still not there, so.
So I'd suggest that the record show based on Joe's notes when the sign was put up. Okay. Just so that-
Yeah, those are on the record.
And could I give you
So-
my videos that it hasn't been there as part of the record?
if
They're
you wanna
dated.
submit, it wouldn't, a video,
They're all
Format
dated,
would-
time dated.
wouldn't normally be something that you can submit into the record. If you like them, if you have a copy that you would like to have made part of the record, if it's a copy, you could do that.
Okay, I will, thank you. I'll bring it to Village Hall.
We'll move to this side of the room.
wait,
We're not done.
Okay.
Carol Essex Chestnut, while you're talking about the postings, I just have a question. Were two notices in the last local newspaper, one in this column and one in that column. The one in this column said the meeting was on January 10th in Village Hall, and then one column over, if you kept reading, they said there's a meeting January 3rd here. So are we gonna accommodate the people who said, oh, I found the meeting, it's January 10th, who are going to Village Hall next week? I mean, it was very contradictory.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of the,
I ripped it out of the paper at home.
all I know is that notifications were made and that they'll be part of the record, so
So is there a meeting next week?
there's not a meeting next week.
So maybe we need
No.
to send an email out or something to tell people the meeting happened.
That should have been sent out for this one.
Well, the meeting's gonna stay open, so
Yes,
people will have an opportunity to comment at a later date.
Right.
Mark, I couldn't hear what you said.
The meeting's gonna stay open, so people will have a chance to comment until we have some more postings, and
You mean at a later time?
that's right.
I'm sorry, I just walked in. At a later time, you mean?
Oh, okay, so, yeah, I explained earlier, is that, the second notification, came a little short on the time that it needs to be done, so we are extending the length of this hearing until the second notification can be made again.
All right, thank you.
And then, so I'm anticipating that this meeting will continue through January 29th. And at that time, we will have another public meeting, time to provide comments, and I'm also accepting written comments.
Okay.
Hi, Susan Liskowski, Poquott.
Stand up.
Susan Liskowski,
Stand up,
Poquott.
stand up.
I just don't, maybe someone could explain why notices don't go out through the village about these meetings. We get notices about Santa Claus coming to town and paternalistic notices about what to do in a storm, as though we didn't know to have batteries and flashlights and stuff. How come we don't get a notice from the village
Well, we're the
of
planning board,
email
so
vote,
that's-
an email?
Yeah, we're the planning board, we're not.
No, I know, but I know there are people, I guess I would address that to, then Joe, who's our clerk.
And it's something, I guess, to bring up maybe at a.
Village calendar has every meeting that this village holds.
Yeah.
And why don't you specifically, like, write
It
an
is in the
email?
village
It's certainly
calendar
as
every
important
single time.
as,
Okay, all right, I don't, you know, this notification stuff might be something that could be discussed at a village meeting, and not for us here. The purpose for this meeting is to comment on the design of the dock.
I have a question about that. Just before coming here, looking at the news about the snowstorm and all of that, they were talking about how ice that gets formed on, I think it was in Cape Cod, how ice chunks can come up and do damage to docks. What would ensure in this design against that problem?
Yeah, there's provisions for that, right, Lee?
Yes, this was covered in the feasibility study that we prepared, and also under the village code, there's a requirement for a management plan for the installation itself. That was prepared and approved by the village board of trustees, and that does speak specifically to you know, the fact that maintenance will be needed, float will have to be removed seasonally, placed somewhere in an upland location, and that a bubbler installation could be installed to circulate water around the pilings if there are freezing conditions. It is understood and it's recognized in the management plan, and the trustees recognize that when you install a dock, it's in the elements of the marine environment, and it will require maintenance. So I know that they have made provisions for funding of ongoing maintenance, but that has been covered and is contemplated in this design.
Roger Flood, Van Brunt Manor Road. So, mention was made of electric service to the dock and also the potential need for bubblers. Should electricity be provided to the dock if it's anticipated that there'll be occasions where bubblers, which are supposedly driven by electricity, are needed? So I'll put all the questions out there. The second one has to do with upland storage of the floats. And I believe the management plan called for using a crane to get the floats out of the water. It wasn't clear whether that crane was to be used from the water side or the land side. And also, because that would affect how much trampling of the beach there might be. And also, whether there was a specific location identified for this upland storage. I thought the management plan said in the parking lot, so these things would be sitting in the parking lot all winter. And I'm not sure if that was a good idea, especially given that town maintains a dock right down the harbor, and they seem to be able to put they have a place to store floats and so that's number two. Number three is sort of concerns the town also whether there's been any indication of what how the town views this permit request and whether they might add any requirements that would be unacceptable to the village. I'm not sure what those might be, but it seems premature to proceed too far without knowing what the town's and also DEC's opinion of the precise details of this plan. Because we might get partway through and get told something has to happen that's not in the interest of the village. The next item has to do with passages to describe a route over the dock and a way to pass under it. However, village code also says that there has to be a path around the landward end of the dock. I haven't heard any discussion of such a path around the landward end. And so it seems unacceptable that, especially in light of comments about accessibility, that one would just point at the riprap and say, climb the riprap to get around the landward end. And I think I'll stop there for the moment.
Okay, thank you, Roger. As far as electricity, there were various options outlined in terms of the utilities on the dock, and it was determined that water was the one that was of primary importance and was the one that was provided. There is an electrical pole, there's lighting, there's an ability to do a takeoff to feed electricity should a temporary bubbler system be needed. So that would have to be monitored and determined if it will be installed and if an electric takeoff would take place. As far as upland storage, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah, to the electric real quick. One consideration that kind of dissuaded us from pursuing the fixed electric at this time was that it would have to be a full electric service that would have to be provided, not just tapping off of an existing service. And some of the flood zone requirements of that, although achievable at this time, it seemed like it was the best path forward to
ignore it.
power with solar, the lighting. I believe that there's also solar bubblers as well that are available on the market. But that has not been fully addressed at this time.
Thanks. And as far as storage of the floats, I mean, they can, well, first of all, I think the probable method would be from the upland. In other words, There are a lot of companies out there that have very large cranes. I'm a member of the Poquott Yacht Club, and I help with the hauling of the floats every year. And the cranes that they have now have an incredible reach. So all you'd really have to do is, have a couple of volunteers or just contract to have it done. Float the floats to an area where the crane could reach them, and that would likely be in the area at the south end of the parking area, away from the riprap where there is some access. It's usually advisable to do it at high tide, and it's done commonly throughout Port Jefferson Harbor complex for these types of installations. As far as where to put it, that's really quite flexible. I said a suitable upland location, and that's the intent. As you observed, the town, places floats in the town parking lot downtown. I guess the presumption is you don't need as much parking during the winter months, but they could be stored in the grassed area where the baseball backstop is. It could be in the parking lot. I think that would have to be determined just on, operations of the village and where the most sensible location is. As far as permits, all permits have been applied for. We do have New York State Department of State concurrence, indicating that now the Army Corps can proceed. They typically take a little bit of time. We've had permits pending with the town of Brookhaven and DEC. We've received comment letters back from each of them, so they've been logged in, and we've responded to all outstanding comments at this time. We do not expect anything at this point that would alter the plans that we have prepared based on the comments we have. And we did do pre-applications with all of the agencies to, really get their sense of the project. I will say that this is a very straightforward installation. It's very similar to what you see for recreational piers for residential homes around the harbor. It's nothing that was abnormal or unusual to the agencies, and that's reflected in their comments to date. As far as passing over and under,